Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to talk about something very special that impacts a lot of people out there who have been in the process known as adoption. On the program today, our guest had actually placed her unborn daughter up for adoption, but years later did everything she could to find and connect with her daughter. Her story shows how the adoption shaped everyone involved, the daughter, birth mother, as well as the adoptive mother. Her new memoir, To Have and to Hold, which was published, is the first of a series of 3 books for those involved in adoption. It covers the relinquishing of her first child, Amy, for closed adoption and subsequent development of a flourishing relationship with her and her family, with a focus on the connection between the 2 mothers. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest and author of the book, To Have and to Hold. Thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Yes, hi, Daniel. I'm happy to be here. It's Lori Antos Benson, yeah.
Yeah, it sounded like we got our connection kind of stopped there for just a second there.
Oh,
I was
okay.
putting that out there, and I was like, I wonder if that sounded the way it should. Now, let's talk about how this all started for you. What was going on here?
Well, I had actually just started a big break in my career. I was in my mid-20s, and I had been dating someone and found myself pregnant. As the months went by, I realized I was really not in a good position to provide the kind of childhood that I would want to for my child. My job was 24/7, weekends, nights, around the clock, and it just, there was no guarantee that the father was going to be a part of this. I had no family in the city, and I just felt very strongly that my child, I deserved more than being in daycare all day long, and at night too. I just wasn't going to be present. And it was a very long, difficult decision. Went back and forth many, many times, as you can imagine. But in the end, I did place her for adoption, and that's how it started.
It's really unique because when you think about adoption out there, usually you hear stories of what seems to be extreme circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
This didn't seem to be that situation there. It was more of an idea like, well, I would like this child to actually have a life to be nurtured and loved, to get the kind of attention that, a parent should be giving a child. Not to say that there's anything wrong with what you were doing at all, but it tends to be the opposite of the spectrum where, it's a desperate teenage mother sort of a situation. But that really wasn't the case here.
Exactly. It wasn't. I could have quit my job. I could have, moved back to Ohio where my family was. But I didn't have very many options or opportunities there. It was different. I was not, at that time, your average birth mother. But it was just a feeling, something inside of me that felt like this is the best thing for her. It wasn't the best thing for me at the time. I would have loved to have been able to raise her, but at the time I just felt as if I looked at her life, realistically, I knew what it was going to be. And that's not to say, daycare is so bad or anything like that. It was the amount of daycare. It was that my job didn't have, regular hours. I would be on the phone at night. I would, do what I had to do. So I just knew that it would really be difficult, and I just felt like it wasn't right for her. And I have to add that today, many of birth mothers today are not teenage mothers, but rather a lot of times they're married, and maybe they already have several children, and they just can't afford another child. I mean, things are a little different today in that regard. So, your image of what and who a birth mother is very different.
There's a wonderful movie that's out there that I remember seeing a few years back that has to do with it was an Indian child that grew up
Oh
in an
yes,
adopted family. It was starring Nicole Kidman, I believe it was.
Lion. Yeah.
And it's an amazing movie because he, talks to her about the fact that he felt that he didn't know the truth that she could have children but decided not to. She says,
Mhm.
look, there were plenty of people in this world having children that had no place for these children to go and to be nurtured. She figured, why should I bring another one in the world when I can go ahead and take one of those?
Yep.
And I mean, this is where I want to shed the light on this because, again, as I was saying earlier in the program, people think of adoption, they think of these negative extreme circumstances, but here's a situation you thought to yourself, let's just, I like what I'm doing in my life. I like what I'm doing in my career. I don't see a child, maybe, and I'm not trying to think or speak your words here, but that could be better off this way. And
Yeah,
that's
it
okay
wasn't
for me.
so much. Yeah, it wasn't so much that. In the end, it wasn't me choosing, my career over my child. It was more that as I explored other options, none of them seemed great. None of them seemed like, okay, this is going to be what's right. And I just had this I can't explain it. It was just deep inside of me, this overriding feeling that I needed to do what was right for my child. I needed to love her the best way I could. And when I really put it up for discussion in my mind, it was clear that this was going to, be what was right for her. I mean, you can say what you want. I'm a big believer in that things work out the way they're meant to be and that there's a plan. I do believe that, and our story is certainly an illustration of that.
Absolutely. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the difference between, you've written two books, what each of these two books actually offer to the readers.
Yes, two on adoption. I've written also another book, but the two on adoption, the first is my story, and I wrote that one because we've had tremendous success in our relationship. Actually, in your opening, you said that I did everything I could to find her. I did nothing. I had made a pledge to myself and in a letter to her mother that I was not going to be the one to enter into their lives, but that I was there at any time that my daughter would be, wanting to have a relationship. And when she was 16, she actually made that very decision, which couldn't have been better, or it was a dream come true for me. And it then progressed from this wonderful, incredible reunion when she and her adoptive mom came. We were living in Florida. They spent the weekend, and it was glorious. It was just so great. And one of the most incredible things that happened is between me and her adoptive mom, there was just this link, this immediate connection, and we were like old friends. And because of how this developed, and because of what happened afterwards, where her adoptive family, her parents, could not have been more welcoming, were so happy to have my girls, my biological girls, enter into their family. It became this blended family, and it's like that today. I mean, they were so close. Katie and her husband went on a big family trip with us to Thailand. We go to visit them. They come here. We're all family. And I just felt like that story is one that needs to be told. And the story of her adoptive mom, who really acted out of total love and it was not fearful of, how is this going to change our lives? We don't need more people in our family. Nothing like that. It was fully supportive of what her daughter wanted, and her saying, which I've actually adopted into a lot of my speaking is the more love, the better. And I feel like that story needs to be told. We need to hear from an adoptive mom who did everything right. And so that's how that book happened. And then my publisher just felt like we need to go further with this, and what else can we do? And we ended up doing Adopting Hope, which is a collection of stories from adoptive parents, birth parents, and adoptees. And it turned into a tremendous resource because it's all three viewpoints talking about, their experience, what they did right, what they did wrong, advice they'd want to pass on. So it's really a terrific resource. And we're now working on a third book. Looks like it might be a children's book.
Now, as you came to have this reunion with your daughter for the first time, tell us about what was going on there. I mean, that must have been quite an experience for you.
Yeah, one of the top 10 for sure in my life. We did it slowly. She sent me a letter when she was 13. That was another great moment. And then over the next 3 years, occasionally I got another letter and she was suggesting maybe we could communicate. We started to communicate by email, and then the first phone call, and she wanted to meet. So we arranged it. It happened to be my birthday weekend, so it was like the best birthday present ever. And they came, a lot of her motivation was that she had three half-sisters. And I had sent them a Christmas picture or something of the three girls, and that was a huge thing to her. It really hit her, that there were these three human beings out there that were, part of her family. And so that whole weekend, the bonding that went on was just so wonderful. And, we did all kinds of normal things. We went to the beach. We, hung out in the hot tub. We just hung out. And one of my favorite stories from that time was when they first came, and, of course, all the first hug, the tears, the laughing, everything. And as things settled down a little bit, her adoptive mom, Ann, and I went and sat on the couch with a glass of wine, and she was in the kitchen with my husband. And she looked at us on the couch, and we were laughing and touching each other's arms and carrying on. And she looked at Steve and said, and I thought this was all about me. And I just love that story because it really was about all of us. It was, an entire family experience.
It's pretty incredible when you think about all of that coming together again and the positive message that you have about something like this. And I know in your book, when you talk about all the different stories in Adopting Hope, let's talk about those for a bit.
Yes. This book turned into something amazing for me because, this was, the publisher thought we should do more. And so I had to come up with something. I didn't have an outline. And it just kind of came together. I thought, okay, well, it'd be good to hear from all three. Well, as the stories came in, it was just amazing, the wisdom that people were, willing to go deep. People told me later, how emotional the experience was for them to, write down their lessons learned and to write out their story and to just kind of go back. And so it was it's very heartfelt. The stories are beautiful as you read through them. You're really getting the real deal. I mean, you're really getting somebody's heart and soul. And so as these stories came in, I started to realize, my gosh, this is a tremendous resource. This is going to be good for anybody who's on an adoption path, whatever perspective you're coming from. A lot of wisdom from the adoptees. They lived it, they felt their feelings, and it's all about the children. So it was really good to hear what they all had to say.
It's incredible to think about the compilation and everything that's going on with the different stories and the experiences that people are having. And when you think about your own experience in compiling all the research in these stories and adopting hope, what would your top piece of advice be to parents who are looking to adopt, birth parents and adoptees alike?
Yes, so I have actually lots of advice. I think my biggest takeaway was that don't wait as an adoptive parent to tell your child their story. One thing that Anne, my birth daughter's mom, told me is from the minute she got Katie, she was talking about her story. As she was rocking them in the cradle, she was talking about her story. And she basically just wove it into her narrative, and so she never remembers a time where she didn't know. And that's critical. So in the book, in Adopting Hope, you hear some stories that aren't, perfect and that didn't go exactly right. And a lot of times it's because they didn't get the whole story, or there wasn't this openness around it, which gives the adoptee a feeling of, this is different, and this is secret, this is, whatever. And there's a lot of trauma that can come with being told later in life, certainly, that you're adopted. So that was probably the biggest takeaway. But I do feel like I know, what works and what doesn't work. And if you'd like, I can kind of take you through that.
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the negative, what doesn't work, because I would like to end more on a positive note. But for birth parents, you don't want to push a biochild for a relationship. You don't want to try and interfere in the parenting. You want to let the child be the lead in where the relationship goes. As much as, I'm sure that you, as a birth parent, want more from your child. You take what the child, and when the child is willing to give, and to never blame the child for anything, including searching. I mean, even if you don't want a relationship, I think, you have to understand that this is a natural urge to search, and at least give them that. Just be honest about, your situation. And then for adoptive parents, fear doesn't work. Fear is very natural, but it absolutely doesn't work. If you worry that your child's going to leave you, or if you embrace the birth parent as a mom or dad, you're not going to react in a supportive way. Don't feel betrayed if your child wants to search, because, like I said, it's absolutely normal. And you don't want to treat an adoptive child any differently from a biological child, which sounds like, that would never happen, but it does. I mean, I certainly heard in the stories sometimes that even not meaning to, it can happen. And for adoptees, I heard stories about pitting birth parents against adoptive parents, and that's obviously not a great idea. These are two sets of parents who really tried to do the best they could for you. They made sacrifices, so you don't want to, pit them against each other. And don't expect too much from birth parents, because that was a sacrifice that was made, and they also have needs and lives, and so you want to go with very real expectations. And then on the good side, what does work, for all three, it's acting from a place of love, and put that first. For the birth parents, you already have acted from a place of love by, making this choice for your child. And so don't push, don't rush, just let the child lead, and understand that the adoptive parents, understand their place as parents and honor that. For adoptive parents, what works is, like I said, honesty, openness, understanding, and again, acting from that place of love, not fear. I would say remember that the birth parent made it possible for you to parent. So if you respect that and try and understand the birth parent's needs too, you'll be, acting out of love, and that's going to work. And don't feel betrayed if your child decides to search. I've talked to a lot of adoptive parents who felt like, they do that. I just feel like, why would they do that? I've raised them. I'm their mom. But it's just deep inside of them, a need. And
and that's so true, because there's this longing in someone to just know the center of their own truth. And I'll tell you what's really unique about this. Adoption, let's just say, the way I want to frame this, is at the extreme end of a situation of family. We've had on the program a guest searching for family, and he is a sort of, call it a genealogy DNA expert, talking about how nowadays you can go out and you can get DNA testing to basically help with your genealogy process, find out the roots of who you are.
Right.
And it's really incredible that people get excited when they realize the kind of notifications they get. Did you know that you had family, let's say, in Georgia? And all of a sudden, these people are gung-ho to go and connect with these people. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, years ago, there was a man that I connected with who was one of my youngest half-brothers who, sort of knew that I was out there, but he, really wasn't sure, from my father's side of the family. So I reached out to, it was actually his stepfather. He says, well, I had no idea you even existed. And I said, look, it's been this long, no worries. Let him know whenever you feel comfortable about it. I just want to let him know that I'm out there if he ever wants to connect. I felt I was just reasonable about the whole thing.
Right.
Now, I knew about these guys, but really they didn't know about me, kind of a thing. And so eventually he calls, we connect. The two older brothers I've never talked to. But I've talked with the youngest one, interestingly enough, who has my same name, Danny, of all things. That's what our father decided to name his youngest son anyway. So we talked for a while, and that was about that. My whole attitude was I was just letting you know I'm out here.
Right.
Now, what happens is, years later, my wife says, there's a guy named Danny on the phone, and he wants to talk to you. And I'm like, Danny, really? After all these years? And there wasn't that many years, but it was a good couple of years.
Yeah.
And so we start talking, and he's apologizing left and right because he's like, I kind of blew you off, that kind of thing. I said, it was really no big deal. I was just reaching out to you to let you know I was out here. It was really your step from that point on. He says, well, what happened is that this woman had called, and apparently she's a birth sister. Now, that's something I didn't know about. Now, just imagine all this. And it kind of really is within the same frame of what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
So I call her, pretty much right away, and I said, it's kind of great to hear from you, to know about you, that sort of thing. But here's the thing, from my perspective. Now I can see how my brother must have felt when I called. Sure,
right.
We called, we're connecting, we're talking that first conversation. But after that, what do you talk to him about?
Right.
You need that
right.
time, and that's what I gave him. And she was real gung-ho, though, to get to know me, but I'm feeling like, but what do I talk to her about, really, after this initial conversation? And that's a lot of what he talked about, this DNA expert, about that is, you just have to know how to take those right steps when they present themselves naturally, if they do at all.
And to not go in with expectations at
right.
all, because it can
because
go
you'll get
either
disappointed
way.
without a doubt, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in fact, a lot of the wisdom that's in Adopting Hope absolutely applies to these DNA searches, because these are special relationships. These are, not your ordinary. If somebody comes into your life, years later after the fact, it takes time. And again, if you can just act out of compassion, act out of love, just give it time. you're going to have a better result. Does that mean you're going to, travel on vacations like we do together? No. I know I'm not Pollyanna. I know that all situations can't, turn into what we have. But I think more could if people, can kind of follow these kind of patterns. And it's very similar to the DNA situation. No question about it. I mean, I just heard, where did I read it in the paper about a woman doing the same thing that you did. She found out about this through DNA and decided to search them out. Well, it turned out that, the mother didn't know that the father had ever had an affair or, had ever had anything go on like that. And these 4 siblings just threatened to go to an attorney. Do not come back, do not write to us. That's hurtful. That is going to be something that hurts. And I feel like that's not acting out of love. I mean, you don't have to welcome them into the family and confront this elderly mother, but at least understand that this person is reaching out and give them a little, give them something like you did, just something that they can then think about and decide later if they want to do anything.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And again, that was about me connecting with, some people that I knew were out there. But the daughter coming to me, I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How about that? But it also didn't surprise me knowing my father.
Right.
That sort of thing. But, in the end, I ended up somehow losing her contact information. And because I realized just like him, I thought, well, I wouldn't mind connecting with her. I know she's made this effort and, and that sort of thing. And I enjoyed talking with her. But it was, I think, 2 or 3 days later when I didn't call back, I get this sort of, extremely emotional message, I'm here whenever you need me, this and that. And I'm like, well, honey, calm down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're excited about all this, but, just kind of, you got to think of the impact that you must be having. Like I thought, but in my situation, I was just like, well, I'm out there. It's up to you what you want to do from here, kind of a thing. And I think that's definitely a key message here. When you talk about expectations, is don't really have them. Have the desire, but don't act on that because you're going to end up disappointing yourself, I think.
Exactly.
In many
and
cases.
when you have that meeting or phone call or whatever, I would lead with, I have no expectations, and this can go however you want.
I'm just letting you know I'm out here. If you're interested, yeah.
Exactly.
I'm curious, though, because you have this wonderful relationship now with your daughter and obviously, the mother as well.
Yes.
What do you see in your daughter that really reminds you of you?
Oh, my gosh. What's so
That must be a lot of fun for you
it,
now seeing, wow.
You know who really got a kick out of all of that nature versus nurture is Anne, her adoptive mom. She just loved that Katie was interested in television and broadcasting from little, and that's what I did. I was in television. And she loved that, and she loved how the two of us, I was a producer. She's a producer in life. She and I have that same kind of, organizing all the ducks in the row, we just have that gene, and Anne just got such a kick out of it. And the other thing was her similarities to my girls. There are, there's 2 of them that kind of look alike. There's 2 of them that talk alike. There's just things that are innate, and that is really, really fun. And I will mention, from Adopting Hope, there was a couple stories where, for the adoptees, to see someone and meet someone who has their eyes or has their chin has so much impact. Because, they've grown up and they can grow up as happy as can be, but they don't have that, oh, you look just like your mother, and so that was important to several of the contributors in the book, that they finally saw somebody. One talked about looking at her birth father's hands and realizing that I have those same hands. So, I think that's part of the need to search, is to have people in your life that look like you, which is understandable.
But as we were just talking about, it extends beyond, the aesthetics. We were talking about personality and character traits, because at the time, this was many years ago in my situation, she was actually in the same industry that I was in at the time, which was bartending and serving.
Yep.
And that we like this inherent need to go out and serve the public and actually sort of entertain the public, if you will.
Yes. That is, that's just very real. My birth daughter has an adoptive sister, and now she's chosen not to meet her birth family. And this is very personal. So she thought Katie was crazy when she wanted at 16 to meet me. Since then, by the way, she's all part of our great blended family. She, is one of the sisters and everything else. But so Anne, her adoptive mom, really, did kind of wanted her to meet her. She was curious. Anne gets a big kick out of all this and is curious, and but respects her wishes. So she's only talked to her on the phone a few times and that kind of thing. Well, come to find out that she has so many similar characteristics to Katie's sister. So her birth mother was into design, so is Katie's sister. Her birth mother liked to move furniture around constantly and change the house. So did Mary Ellen. So yes, there are definitely, it's fun to see these inherent characteristics, and the whole nature versus nurture discussion.
Well, I know that as people read your books, they'll come to realize that they're in situations to decide whether that's a choice they want to make. They'll certainly be clear about how to navigate this whole thing, because it's not an easy decision. Maybe in some cases it is, but it's really not about what to do, how to move forward, because, there is what they call open and closed adoptions. I mean, there are those situations where it's done. I don't want anything to do with that. But you just never know with a child when they finally, even in a situation with a closed adoption, says, I just have this yearning inside of me to get some questions answered. It's just the way it is.
And it doesn't reflect on the family or the parenting or anything that you as an adoptive parent have done. I mean, Katie and Anne could not be closer. The fact that I am a part of their family relationship does not affect their relationship at all. And that's important, because I think that's when fear comes in, is what is this going to do to our relationship? And, again, if everybody acts out of love, it's not going to do anything to your relationship. It's only going to enhance, the family. So that's to me a very important part of this whole thing.
Absolutely. It's always a wonderful subject to talk about, because there is a lot of confusion from people, whether it's from children who are actually looking to search, thinking they're betraying the parents that raised them and gave them everything, and as much as the feeling of perhaps selfishness on the part of the parent who gave this child up for adoption. Maybe they were in extreme circumstances. Certainly you weren't talking about that in your case, but there it is. Losing Isaiah is one of those kind of movies, that, deals with the subject of extremes, but then somebody changes their life and says, but I'd kind of like to see how this turns out. All you got to do, as you say, is kind of, approach this whole thing with respect and compassion, and just kind of see where it goes. And again, don't have these tremendous expectations of how you would like it all to turn out on both sides of the fence, and just take it forward. That's the best you can do it. And your books, such as Adopting Hope and To Have and To and Not to Hold, are those kind of things that can actually help people go, okay, I see now what my steps, if any, I should be taking.
Well, I hope so. I mean, the first one, To Have and Not to Hold, I really, and I've heard from many people that it can really serve as an inspiration that this can work out. So somebody who is thinking of doing a search, if it's approached out of love, this can work out. And I also wanted it to show that for the birth parent, I mean, this is huge. That was the hardest choice I've ever had to make, as you can imagine. And it worked out to where I feel like this was meant to be. This enhanced all of our lives in the end. And I wanted that message out there for people who were considering placing their child. This can work out for you too. Not that it's going to be easy. I mean, it's not. It's a terrible choice. And obviously, it's best if you don't have to make that kind of choice at all. But I just want it to be known that it is a decision that you can make that gives your child a life, and you can do it, and you can end up happier because of it. And I feel like our situation is an example of that. I would never have met my husband. You can do that all day long. This wouldn't have happened. This wouldn't have happened. I'm sure my life would have turned out okay and fine with the other decision. But I do know with this decision, it enhanced all of us. So I just want to encourage people who are considering, either ending the pregnancy or, don't think they can do this, that it can be not just a great gift that you can give to somebody, which, that's not a reason enough. It's for yourself. It can be the best thing for you also.
Very well said. Lori, I want to thank you for being on the program today. Again, for the listeners out there, the book is To Have and Not to Hold, as well as Adopting Hope. Is there a website people can go to find out more about your work and how they can get the book, things like that?
Yes, absolutely. The books are available, of course, on Amazon and in bookstores. My website is Lori, spelled Lorri, Antos, ANTOS like Sam, Z like zebra, Benson, BENSON .com. So that is my website. You can find all kinds of information there.
Well, thank you so much for being on the program today. Again, this is always such an exciting and compelling subject in so many different ways,
Everybody has a connection.
Yeah, they actually do. Yeah,
Yep.
We're all connected one way or the other. So.
Yep. And
yeah,
you just start talking about it, and everybody comes with their story. They knew somebody or in their family.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again, Lori, for coming on the program and sharing your story with our listeners out there.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much.
You bet. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can also connect with Beyond 50 at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter and keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50 as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.